Hi there, I'm Danny Flex and welcome to the latest edition of SecondsOut ReFLEXions. We're here every Monday at 4:30 PM to talk about the boxing action of the weekend just gone. Now initially I was going to discuss the hot topic of the minute, and that's Josh Warrington's shock defeat to Mauricio Lara, ending a streak of 3-0 straight wins. But it seems that between my colleague Joe Lee and John Houston from South Morton Boxing Club, they've pretty much got that subject covered, which allows me the time to talk about something else from Saturday's bill at Wembley Arena, and something that's probably long overdue discussion, and that's officiating and judging in the UK. And I'm not just talking about the Warrington fight, where it was seemed questionable at best that referee Howard Foster did not step in round 4 when Warrington was first dropped. Looked all over the place, asked Warrington to walk towards him. He did so on bandy legs, didn't look in any fit state to continue, but was allowed to go on and take a shellacking for several more rounds before the stoppage finally came. Not a criticism of Foster specifically. He obviously felt in the moment he was making the right decision, but just the general, what seems to be a bit of a decline in British officiating in recent times. And this was emphasised even more so by the chief support, in which Kiko Martinez, Spanish veteran, former world champion, looked incredibly unfortunate not to get the decision over young prospect / contender Zelfa Barrett in their contest. Now, I didn't sit down with pen and paper and score it round by round, but I did in my head have an idea of who won each round. So I was kind of going through, that's a Martinez round, that's a Martinez round. There weren't many where I said that was a Barrett round. And I thought afterwards, I think there was a maximum of 3 rounds I gave to Barrett. Now, some rounds were close and hard to score. And I think Carl Frampton said on Twitter, and he was one of many that bemoaned the decision, said that he had it 7-5 in rounds to Martinez, who was on the front foot throughout, showed quite underrated guile as well to roll under rangy Barrett's long shots and get in close and land to head and body. Barrett came on stronger as Kiko faded in the second half of the fight and started to land some of those whipping shots, but he must have missed double-digit long left hooks throughout the fight, and it was a great learning experience for Barrett. He was bashed up quite a lot at the end, although so was Martinez, in fairness. But yeah, for me, no more than 3 rounds to Barrett. And even if you're being kind and edge the close rounds to him, he still looked like a 7-5 loser, which is how Frampton had it. But not only was he not given the decision, it was unanimous in Barrett's favour. But not only that, 2 of the scores, I think, had him losing by 7 points. I think it was 118-111 on 2 scorecards. Absolutely crazy. Just didn't see that at all. And if it was just an aberration, it wouldn't have caused as much of an issue on social media as it did. But it seems to be the latest in something of a pattern that's emerging for away fighters coming to Britain. A lot of people on Twitter were citing Miguel Vasquez's recent trip over, where he was adjudged and the loser against Lewis Ritson, which looked a terrible decision also. But that wasn't even the first time that had happened to Vasquez. He looked rather unlucky against O'Hara Davis in a previous visit to these shores. It just seems to be happening quite a lot, not just against foreign visitors, although that seems to be the ones that catch the most attention, or perhaps are the most egregious examples of bad scoring. But it just happens in Brit versus Brit fights as well. We saw a lot of fights over the last year or 2 years. I remember people up in arms about Robbie Davis Jr., his fight against Lewis Ritson, also his fight against Joe Hughes previous to that. And there's been a number of fights. I know Terry O'Connor specifically has come in for criticism due to his some of his questionable scorecards. But it's not just him. He wasn't even on duty on Saturday night, and it didn't stop what happened to Kiko Martinez. Now, when I first got into boxing as a fan, and then later on working for Boxing News, I was at NewsQuest for 10 years, but maybe specifically on Boxing News for 7. It always seemed to be a concern about British fighters going abroad to certain countries, particularly, I think Italy was one, Germany was another. I think Italy specifically at the time was because a lot of their shows weren't on TV, so you could get away with, robbing, for lack of a better word, a foreign fighter from Britain, because no one really, beyond the people that were at ringside, would see it. And so there wouldn't be any major controversy. Things are different now, obviously, with nearly every show on TV or online in some form. Germany was always a very difficult one to go and get a decision. Felix Sturm memorably got the benefit of the doubt against Matthew Macklin, Martin Murray, had that string of fights where he looked lucky to retain his middleweight world title at the time. But that seems to have dissipated somewhat now. Maybe it's just because I watch a lot more British fights, but it seems that there's not as many of these contentious decisions in the likes of Germany, Italy. We see a lot more Italian fights now with Matchroom Boxing Italy, of course, France and so on. Now, the vast majority of controversial decisions, even the US doesn't seem to be as bad or have as much of a problem with scorecards as we do at the moment. And maybe it's been amplified by the fact that we have so many shows going on at the moment in a time where, you know, there's a pandemic and there's a lot of stuff not going on. Also, the fact that maybe we can focus more on the action in the ring because there's no fans in attendance to distract our attention. But whatever the reason is, it certainly seems like we have a major issue now. And even Eddie Hearn, the promoter of the show, acknowledged this. Now, you could say he's got somewhat of an ulterior motive in that he wants to sell a rematch between Zelfa Barrett and Kiko Martinez. But I think he was dead on in what he said after the show. He said if Barrett won, and he's very much implied he didn't think he won, although he didn't say it outright, but if Barrett won, he won by a round or two. Now, I think that even that's generous, but obviously he's Zelfa's promoter and he can't come outright and say, no, you lost, that's it. Zelfa was right in front of him when he was talking as well, so it's awkward, isn't it? But he was very clear that something needs to be done about the judging. Now, what that something is, I don't know, but you would hope that the voice of Britain's most powerful promoter, to ape Panorama there, hopefully makes the board sit up and listen, the British Boxing Board of Control, because in the past, when they've been questioned about scorecards and referees' performances and so on, they've been quite defensive at times, and that's not always great to see. We want them to be more open, as particularly not to us, the media necessarily, but certainly to their licence holders, of which Eddie Hearn is one. And I'm sure he's not the only one that has a problem with recent scoring issues and officiating in general, you know, refereeing too. So we've got to hope that this serves as a wake-up call. You know, it's a show in a vacuum because it was the first show of the new year on British soil. It got a lot of attention, more so perhaps than other scoring controversies in recent times in this country. So you've got to hope that this has made enough of a splash that the board will now take note and perhaps, instead of just calling the referee or the judge in to explain their scorecard, and then, because what's happened before, and this happened with Terry O'Connor, they called him in and basically put out a very brief press release that said he's explained his scorecard and the board are satisfied that it was his honest appraisal of the fight. No one's questioning it. Well, maybe we are questioning, but in this case, no one's questioning whether the appraisal of the fight was honest. It's more whether it's accurate and abides by the scoring criteria that's laid down. And I think publicising that scoring criteria better would be helpful. And I think when the judges are asked to come in and make those explanations, maybe make those public as well, so we can go back, watch the rounds, and judge them against what the particular judge's explanation is. Maybe then we'll have a better idea of why they scored it how they did. And if there is no, you know, acceptable explanation, then the judging question needs to be, you know, retrained or taken off bills for a short amount of time, whatever it takes to improve the overall standard. I'm not saying we're the only ones with the problem. It's just most notable in this country at the moment. And eventually, and this is something Eddie Hearn alluded to, foreign fighters are going to be less willing to come over and take on these prospects. Now, at the moment, we're in a good position because we're one of the countries putting on regular boxing during a pandemic. And boxers need money. They need a living. So they're having to come over. They haven't got as much bargaining power as they've had in the past. But if this carries on and you know you can fight your heart out and look to most observers like you've won and get the short end of an unfair decision, once boxing's back to normal after the pandemic, you're going to find boxers more reluctant to come over. We already see the top American stars don't really come over here much. That's more to do with they can make more money at home than they're worried about hometown decisions. But that's going to be an extra impediment to getting the best of imported boxers coming here. And that's a concern. So I think, yeah, the board needs to take a long, hard look at this, be a bit more open about their processes, but most importantly, take some action, some measurable action this time around. Now, obviously, I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments box below. What do you think of the weekend's build, particularly Martinez-Barrett? How did you score it? And what do you think are some steps, practical steps, that we can take in Britain to improve the standard of officiating all round? Or let me know if you don't think there's a major problem. That's fine too. Happy to be disagreed with. I'll be back on Thursday for ReFLEXions, looking ahead to the Avanesian versus Kelly main event, as well as the rest of that card on Thursday. 4:30 p.m. and then Monday 4:30 p.m. the next ReFLEXions. As always, really appreciate your time and I will see you all soon. Cheers.